If Miles hadn't smiled back from the glass door, I might have believed I was alone. We were 19, hunting part-time hours before college when Griddle Go called us for the late shift. The place sat at the edge of a disused retail plaza in Bridgemont, where streetlights hummed like bees and the wind smelt faintly of fryer oil. I say us, but that's part of the problem. Miles never fills out applications. He never sits for interviews, he just walks in with me. Inside, the evening manager, Ms. Patel, handed me a mop bucket and a grin that looked relieved. Warehouse first. Shelves, labels, a light mop. You'll be fine. The door marked supply side open. The air dropped 10 degrees. Fluorescents rattled awake, spreading a chalky light across tall racking that seemed too deep for the footprint of the building. I checked the layout map posted near the entrance. The shaded warehouse zone was a neat rectangle. What I stood in was not. Bigger inside, Miles murmured at my shoulder. His breath fogged. Mine did not. I pushed the mop forward, counting aisles. 1, 2, 3. Then the light at the far end dimmed the way distance does on night roads, as if I'd walked past the edge of the floor plan into something that didn't care about plans. A whisper of cardboard on cardboard slipped down the row. A smear of shadow pulled itself off a stack of cups and stood up, tall and patient. "You see that?" I asked. Miles tilted his head. "You always ask the wrong one." The silhouette was almost kind. It gave me time. It let me decide to look away, to pretend the lights were flickering, to tell myself the AC was rattling vents. When I looked back, the darkness had grown eyes, small ember-red points that found me without blinking. The mop handle clacked out of my hands. On the shelf to my left, case labels quivered as if something inside exhaled. Ms. Patel's voice floated in from the kitchen. "Doing okay back there?" "Fine," I called too quickly. The red points vanished. The fluorescence steadied. Miles smiled. "Easy," he said, but the word landed sideways. We finished fast. Still, when I clocked out, the glass door reflected 2 boys. Behind us, the warehouse door was slightly ajar, though Miss Patel swore she'd dead-latched it. In my reflection, Miles lifted 2 fingers with a lazy salute. I went home with a headache. At 3:12 a.m., my TV woke itself, a crawling field of static, whispering like a crowd that had learnt English phonetically. Miles stood in front of it, toes not touching carpet, with a soft sway like a man on a boat. "You're not sleeping," he said, but his mouth didn't move. The static brightened, condensed, and then split like a pupil, and a thin filament of sound slid under my skin. I shouted his name. The sway stopped. He turned his head, only his head, and the rest of him stayed facing the TV. The motion was too smooth, like a camera pan. A laugh threaded my room, but my throat was tight and silent. When he lunged, I slammed my door and braced it with a chair. The knob twitched and stopped. Then, gentle as a metronome, thud, thud, thud. It went on for an hour, or a year. At dawn, silence folded over the apartment like a blanket. On day 2, Ms. Patel called me into the office for a quick check-in. "Everything okay?" she asked, kind in the careful way of managers who've seen teenagers evaporate from schedules. "Could I switch stations?" I said. "Maybe front counter, not warehouse." "Of course," she began, and then frowned, eyes touching the empty chair beside me. "Do you prefer working alone?" I tried to laugh. "I've got my brother." She blinked. "You told me you're an only child." The office light clicked twice. Something cold licked my left ear. In the glossy black of the computer monitor, a tall, tongued shape leaned behind me, and Miles smiled a smile I didn't know I had. He squeezed my shoulder, not hard, no bruises ever, and spoke with my voice pitched just a half note wrong. "Don't talk about me," he said. I stood, chair skidding back. Miss Patel flinched, eyes on nothing, 1 foot to my left. The room smelt like wet cardboard and copper. I reached for the door. It didn't move. "You brought me inside," Miles said. His fingers, my fingers, tightened with a strength that wasn't 19. "You made room," security was called. Forms were signed. Ms. Patel asked if I needed someone to pick me up. I said no and walked home in the noon sun that didn't feel like light at all. Weeks later, I can make it to dawn sometimes without the TV. On good nights, Miles only stands on my balcony railing and watches the warehouse door in my memory, slightly ajar, patient. On bad nights, we watch together. He tells me the truth softly, like you tell a child hard news. There was never enough room for 2, so I borrowed your name. The red eyes are kind enough to wait in the corner until I look. They always are. I don't go back to Griddle and Go. I don't walk past the plaza when the streetlights hum. But when my hallway feels one aisle too long, when my reflection shows a boy and his brother, I know the map is wrong again and the warehouse is open. And the thing that learnt my shape is still learning what it can do with it. It is calm when it says the line it wants me to memorize. "We are not two," it whispers hot against my ear. "We are practicing." And then the lights are steady and the room is precisely the right size and I am alone. Marla smiled and walked straight into traffic. I realized some nightmares don't wait for nightfall. It was a normal Wednesday lunch shift at Griddle and Go. The kind of day where the smell of frying oil clings to your clothes no matter how long you shower. The line of customers snaked around the counter, office workers and college kids waiting for burgers that all looked the same. I was working at Register 2, feeling new on the job, nervous, and still memorizing the buttons. Our manager, Marla, was the backbone of the place. Everyone said she could handle anything. She'd worked here almost 15 years, longer than some of us had been alive. She was strict and fair and always had a red pen in her pocket for marking shift notes. But that week, something in her had changed. At first, it was subtle. Long pauses during orders, a faraway stare when the fryers hissed too loud. Then came the whispering. I'd glance over and see her talking to no one, mouthing words under her breath. The crew joked that she was finally cracking from too many night shifts. I laughed too until I heard what she was saying. "I can't hear them anymore. It's getting louder." The words didn't make sense, but the tone, broken, desperate, made my stomach twist. That afternoon she called me to restock sauces. When I passed by, she was standing by the soda machine, her hands trembling. "Marla?" I asked. "You okay?" She blinked at me like she'd forgotten who I was. Then slowly she smiled, a stretched, empty kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Everything's fine, sweetheart," she said. "They're just getting closer." Before I could reply, she turned and walked out the door. At first, no one noticed. The kitchen noise drowned everything. Timers beeping, grease sizzling, someone shouting for more buns. Then a customer by the window gasped. I turned in time to see her crossing Maple Street, still smiling, still walking. "Marla!" I yelled, pushing through the door. She didn't stop. The light was red. Cars screeched, horns blared, and people shouted, but she just kept walking, slow and calm. Arms swinging gently like she was keeping rhythm to a song only she could hear. And then, she stopped in the middle of the street. For a few long seconds, she just stood there facing us, eyes closed, smile frozen. The wind pushed her hair across her face, but she didn't move to brush it away. Then, without warning, her eyes snapped open. Black, completely black, and she turned her head toward me in one smooth, unnatural motion. Every muscle in my body locked. She whispered something, lips barely moving, but I heard it clearly over the chaos. "Break you. Finish you. You can't escape me." A delivery truck swerved, missing her by inches. She didn't even flinch. Instead, she started laughing, a soft, eerie laugh that sounded like it belonged to someone else entirely. Then she turned back toward the restaurant and started running. I barely had time to move. She slammed into the front door, pounding it with her fists. Customers screamed, stumbling over chairs. "Let me in," she shrieked. "They're coming through the walls!" Her voice cracked into something primal. When an older man attempted to calm her, she struck him across the face with such force that he fell against the counter and collapsed. Blood splattered across the floor tiles. I wanted to help. I really did. But I couldn't move. It was like my feet were nailed down. "Call 911!" someone yelled. Riley, one of the senior employees, grabbed the phone, hands shaking. "Yes, Griddle and Go, Maple Street, our managers—" The words cut off. Marla had leapt over the counter like it was nothing. Her eyes were wide and wild, her grin too wide for her face. She climbed on the counter, crouching like an animal, and started to sing. The itsy-bitsy spider climbed up the water spout. Her voice was sweet, childlike, and entirely wrong. Then she jumped down, straight at Riley. The scream that came out of Riley didn't sound human. Marla grabbed her by the shirt and pulled her close, whispering in a voice that didn't belong in daylight. "I'll crush you like the spider you are." Two male customers rushed in to help, but Marla was impossibly strong. Her body moved like her joints had forgotten how to be human, snapping, twisting, jerking. Her face contorted as if something inside her was trying to break out. We finally managed to drag her away, 4 of us holding her down while she kicked and clawed. Her strength faded only when the police sirens filled the air. The moment the officers burst through the door, her body went limp. She started sobbing, loud, painful sobs that didn't match the voice she'd used seconds earlier. "Please," she begged as they cuffed her. "Please let me go home." I haven't slept in so long. They're still talking. They won't stop. They never stop. The whole restaurant was silent after they took her away. No one touched their food. The fryers beeped, but nobody cared. Riley sat trembling in the corner, staring at the soda machine where Marla had been standing earlier. 2 days later, I learned the truth. Marla's husband had left her months ago. She'd been struggling, medication, therapy, sleepless nights. Some of the staff had noticed small things, her leaving doors open, mumbling during closing, but no one thought it was serious. Until it was. They said she's in a psychiatric ward now, stable but fragile. Occasionally when I close up at night, I look at the front glass doors and imagine her reflection there, smiling, waiting. The streets outside still have faint tire marks from that day. Last week a customer played that same nursery rhyme, "Itsy Bitsy Spider," on their phone while waiting in line. Every single person behind the counter froze. No one said a word. That night I dreamed I was mopping the floor after hours. The restaurant was empty, lights flickering. A soft voice started singing behind me. "The itsy bitsy spider climbed up the waterspout." When I turned, the door was wide open, and the street outside was empty except for a single red shoe lying in the middle of the road. I don't listen to children's songs anymore, and every shift before I clock out, I whisper under my breath, "Sleep well, Marla." Because if she's still out there, I don't ever want her to hear me awake. The men who stepped out of the van knew my name and carried time like a weapon. Slice Station never meant candlelight, but a blown panel in the corner ceiling gave the place an unearned mood. Marco had insisted on dinner. He'd texted twice, then called, a rarity. We'd dated 3 years in the soft shuffle of late 20s. Paychecks, cheap takeout, the kind of plans that require more hope than money. He unwrapped his straw like the wrapper might bite. "Liam," he said, and looked everywhere but at me. I'm in trouble. Gambling didn't fit him. He was the kind of man who argued over ATM fees. But he said the word like a confession you make to a priest in an empty church and then hurry away before God changes his mind. He owed $5,000. He had used my photo to assure men he'd never meet that he was good for it. "You did what?" I asked, and the question felt small. Betrayal is always larger than grammar. He flinched. "I thought I could fix it." I thought. He didn't finish. His gaze slid past me to the front window. The van parked across Maple Street wore nothing but black and intent. 3 men got out, big in the way of practical physics, built for pushing and carrying and ending conversations. "Don't run," Marco said, his voice so thin it nearly wasn't sound. The door chimed. The tallest person, wearing a jacket too fine for pizza, said my name. "Liam Hart." It wasn't a question. He didn't look at Marco, he didn't have to. He looked at me like a list. "I'm not leaving him," I said, surprising myself with how steadily it landed. The world narrowed to 4 people, and a restaurant that suddenly had too many witnesses to be real. People glanced in a way that suggested they were trying to appear uninterested, much like how one reacts when trouble enters the room. "You owe," the tall man said. "Debts are stories with endings. We prefer our endings on time." I wanted to give them thunder. I wanted to grow 6 inches, throw 3 men through a window, and carry Marco out like men do in movies. Instead, my hands shook. I said, "I'll pay." It is a sentence you utter in a room when no other words will suffice. They moved with practice. One man crowding my space without touching, another sliding Marco from the booth with hands that weren't cruel, just certain. The sound Marco made on the tile floor burnt into me. More air than voice, surprise and pain and apology braided together. I reached for him and the world folded. A hand pressed my shoulder like a paperweight. "We don't have all day," the tall man said to me, and the oddness of politeness in that sentence made everything worse. Sirens arrived after the van left. Of course they did. Time obeyed someone else that night. A police officer wrote what he could into a box labeled report, while the medic said words like stabilize, fracture, and we'll see. In the waiting room, chairs faced a television that taught us how to breathe quietly. Will he walk okay? I asked. Eventually, the doctor said. But you don't look like you're asking about his legs. He was right. I was asking what to do with a love that had exploited my vulnerability, drawing me into its debt like an undertow. I was asking how to deal with my own cowardice and the sudden, strange bravery that felt like a promise of, I'll pay. I took extra shifts and sold the guitar I told myself I still played. I learned to weigh envelopes. I sat by Marco's bed while purple faded to yellow around his knees. He cried once when he thought I was asleep. I didn't think they'd touch you, he whispered to the window, because telling the dark is safer than telling me. I thought they would only scare me. Months later, he eats standing up, restless. He hasn't held dice since. Occasionally, he flinches when the door chimes at Slice Station. Sometimes I do. On good nights, we walk past the spot where the van had idled, and nothing in me tightens. On bad nights, I watch every black panel van the way a man watches his hands after he's done harm with them. I don't know the ending yet. Some stories pay in full. Some debts change shape. I know I forgave the shape of what he did, if not the size. I know the men who use time as a weapon have schedules too, and I learned how to live in the long minutes after they leave. If you inquired about what I would change, I would respond that I would never permit my photograph to reside on anyone else's device, and then I would reveal the truth you most fear. Love will still surrender itself as readily as cash. You just pray the receipt is something you can carry. He didn't look dangerous until the knife decided for both of us. I chose Neon Burger because no one looks twice at men eating alone there. The sign buzzed like a patient insect, and the booth by the window had a clear view of the door. I don't wear the badge anymore. I carry the habit like scar tissue. Sorry, the counter kid wiped the same patch of laminate with faithful attention. I was midway through fries when the bell chimed, and a man in a long trench coat stepped in. The coat seemed to move him more than he moved himself. It was too warm for October, even for Merrick. Hair damp, eyes unfixed. He stopped just inside, head moving in slow degrees, taking an inventory of something that didn't include us. Sari waited. "Hi there," she said, her voice bright as a form of protection. "What can I get you?" His mouth moved without words. She leaned in. I stood quietly like a tide lifting. He watched her without seeing. Fingers twitched on the table he chose. He wasn't under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Wrong in a way that erases options. Everything okay? I asked, palms visible, voice level. You learn the timbre that makes people breathe. His hand went into the coat. I felt a primal, instinctive sound rise from my gut. The knife was not the type that men in movies typically choose, lacking serrations and any embellishments. A kitchen blade that knows a neck the way it knows an onion. Sari stumbled back into the soda fountain. I took 2 steps forward that felt like one and forever. "Hey," I said, "we can slow this down." "They won't leave me alone," he answered, and his voice carried a sense of relief, as if saying it out loud could be the lever that stops a machine. "They talk when I close my eyes." "Who talks?" I asked. He didn't answer. He moved. The knife created a brief, bright arc towards Sari, and the instinctive training surged up my spine, as familiar as breathing. I do not carry because I like to. I carry because at 2 a.m. once a woman's scream had filled a hallway like water. The pistol is smaller now, legal in the way we tell ourselves safety is legal. "Stop," I said. The shot tore the room. The bell over the door kept chiming its little tune. The man folded as if he'd never straightened. The knife became a clatter, anonymous again. Sari pressed napkins to a thin crescent on her arm, eyes too big, body shaking in the aftermath of adrenaline. "You're okay," I told her. It wasn't a promise I could make. It was the only sentence I own. Police fit the scene into their forms. One of the police officers recognized my name and pronounced it with finality, as if it were a period. The manager handed me water I didn't drink. Sari's cut would heal. Mine would not. The man's last sentence shredded me. They won't leave me alone. Sometimes madness is a flood. Sometimes it's a choir. Months later, I go back at odd hours. Sari works fewer nights. The table where the coat chose to rest has a new top. People sit there like it's a chair in a room that doesn't remember the shape of a body falling. I remember. Guilt is less useful than attention, but it's louder. When the door chimes, I still count hands. I still catalog coats. In the bathroom mirror, I watch my eyes for hardness and don't find it. I don't know if that's beneficial. The world insists on moving on, I let it. But when the ceiling hums just right, I imagine a voice that keeps talking behind my eyelids. I placed my hands flat on the sink and recited the phrase I had reserved for myself that evening. We can slow the process down. Occasionally when I say it to the mirror, it works. Sometimes it only reminds me who I am when steel decides. He always ordered the same thing and left with something of mine I couldn't name. I picked up the graveyard at midnight patty because the hours didn't ask questions. The radio at 3 a.m. plays songs for the unslept, and the drive-through headset becomes a kind of heartbeat. I learnt the friar's language. I learnt which hum meant fine and which meant call Victor before something froths over the tile. At 2:06 a.m., the man in the bomber jacket pulled up for the first time. 2 deluxe patties, no pickles, large cola. Eyes that didn't blink while I counted change. He parked across the street in a rusted sedan with a windscreen like a cataract and ate slowly, looking through us at something behind us. Some customers are scenery. He was weather. He came every night for a week, then every other. The sedan always chose the same shadow under a busted lamp. I saw him once standing beside the car, looking at the restaurant like a man looks at a house he grew up in after someone else paints it. Creepy, Janelle said. My closing partner. Want me to walk you out? I'm fine, I lied. When the headset crackled, I flinched. A manager texted me on my day off. Can you cover tonight? Short-staffed. Rent wins arguments. I said yes. The back entrance rattled at 2:51 a.m. It was locked, of course. Procedure is a religion after midnight. Footsteps paused beyond the door and didn't leave. A minute, 2. Then the softest knock, as polite as you are on a stranger's door when you need to borrow a cup of sugar. Kitchen, I called. We're closed inside, he waited. You can hear waiting when it's heavy enough. The headset whispered stuttered static like it wanted to warn me or gossip. I pretended to sort lids by size until the door chimed at the front. He had found his way in without a noise I could name. Up close, the bomber jacket was leather that remembered storms. He smiled without softness. Step outside, he said, his voice like a cold pan meeting water. I'm working. The sentence was small. He took a step. The dining room, empty except for him and tables that preferred their own business, held its breath. I grabbed the phone near the shake machine. Cyanide rang like a church bell. He moved behind the counter, casual, the way regulars sometimes lean in to ask for extra sauce. The grin he wore said I had become the game he practiced. What do you think the police can do? He asked, not unkindly. Do you think they'll come in time? They didn't, not that night. He watched me work to keep my hands from shaking. He lingered the way fog lingers before a ferry. He wanted me to know he could always find me here, that buildings have habits and people do too. Days later, the general manager sent a message to the staff group. If you see a man loitering in an old sedan, she added a history I hadn't known. He'd worked here 5 years back, fired for theft and something the message didn't spell. A restraining order had worn out its ink. He'd returned anyway. Obsession is a key that fits doors patience picks. He came again a week after. The headset was quiet. The sedan sat like a thought in the corner of my eye. I had rehearsed my voice. We're closed inside after midnight. It didn't shake this time. You should be afraid, he said. The sentence landed on the tile and didn't break. I am, I said. The truth sometimes is the only tool. He blinked. For a breath, his face was a boy's, surprised that honesty could exist inside a place that sells food to people who don't want to cook. He stepped back. The door chimed him out. I kept breathing. Police came the next night when Victor finally got a plate number and the patience to wait in his car with the engine off. 2 officers walked the man out with a long conversation held in hands and wrists. He stared at me through the glass while they wrote something on a clipboard. The stare didn't threaten. It promised repetition. I quit the week after. Sometimes survival is an exit interview you have with your own body. Midnight Patty smells like oil and bleach and the version of me who was braver than I felt. The rusted sedan still parks under busted lamps near other places that aren't mine. I see it when I drive home from late movies. I change streets without shame. When nightmares come, they don't shout. They order 2 patties, no pickles, and thank me by name even if I never wear the tag. In the dream, the headset crackles with a voice that has always known my hours. You can't outrun routine, it says. I wake up and change. I take my coffee from a different shop. I sit at a window that sees a different street. Fear loves sameness. I feed it variety like medicine. On good days, the sedan is just a car. On bad ones, I let myself drive an extra block. And I call it what it is. Not weakness, but a map I redrew. If he ever steps through a door, I'm behind again. I will say the sentence that saved me. I am afraid. It disarms men who expect a lie. It makes room for the next thing I will do. Call, run, shout. Choose the version of me that does not freeze. The world at 3 a.m. still plays songs for the unslept. I hum along, softer than the headset, louder than the fear. And when a rusted sedan passes, I count streetlights until it's gone.